I am here with Amos Chapple, photographer, journalist, currently working in Radio Free Europe. Welcome and thank you for the possibility of the interview with you.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation.
So you are from New Zealand, but you are living in Czech Republic for quite some while. So how does somebody from New Zealand get here, and why did you stay here?
So I was invited here in the beginning of 2016, and I was offered a one-year contract. So it was very uncertain if I would stay here long term. But that first year employed here at Radio Free Europe went well. And so then I eventually landed a permanent contract. But I feel incredibly lucky to be living here in Prague. It really is. It's just a godsend for me. I feel like it takes the best of the Eastern Slavic world and the best of the Western Germanic world, let's say, and this is where those two cultures sort of meet, both historically and in cultural terms. And it's, I think, the best place in the world to live. I've lived in many cities, many great cities. Prague is really the best place on earth. And I first came to Prague actually in 2007. So I was a young guy, and I fell in love with it then. And I tell the story often when I'm presenting to students that I saw people touching something on the bridge, on the Charles Bridge, and I asked someone, what does it mean? And they said, if you touch the bishop, the figure of the bishop, that you will return to Prague. So I avidly touched that monument, and sure enough, I was able to return to Prague permanently. So very lucky. And
what's your favorite place here in Prague?
My favorite place, I would say, depending on the season, I would say spring. On a beautiful spring day, that would be Vyšehrad, walking around Vyšehrad, seeing the monuments that used to be on one of the bridges. In autumn, that would probably be Petrin Hill, and in the summertime, Rigrovi Sadi.
And why did you choose to be a photographer?
Because I had no other way to get into the newsroom, and I was always interested in journalism. My father was a journalist. My sister was a journalist. She's now moved into a different industry. But I was a disaster at school. So I knew I wasn't going to get the qualifications needed to go in through the front door and be a journalist. So the only way into the newsroom that didn't require some impressive piece of paper, impressive diploma, would be by picking up a camera and becoming good at that. So I was sort of forced into it and fell in love with photography too early on. But yeah, it was just a matter of necessity, really.
And from where is your favorite photo you made?
Good question. I would say probably there's a picture that I took actually with an old iPhone, iPhone 11 Pro. I was in Murmansk, and I went there during winter when they don't have any sunlight for, I think, 40 days, something like that. So I was there during this continuous night, and while I was there, at the end of the week that I spent there was a great big blizzard, a snowstorm that hit, and I stood outside near my hotel after being dropped off by someone, and I took a picture of the storm, and it's just a very uniquely Russian scene. And also it was shot on a cell phone in the first iteration of iPhones that had night mode, so you could shoot in very low light, and it's just I think, you know, it looks very artful, and I'm not really an artist. I'm just a photojournalist. I just shoot what's there, but it looked kind of artful, so I'm very pleased with that picture.
And you also write articles, so how does the photo and text work together? Can it tell the same story, or is it different ones?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one thing that I've learned, having transitioned more into writing text, is how important photos are for two reasons. One is as a form of note-taking. So I've learned that when you go to a place, anything that catches your attention, even for a moment, something that's slightly different, slightly unique, especially if you're in a foreign country, just shoot a picture of it. Doesn't matter if the light's terrible, doesn't matter about anything. And when it comes to writing a story, what you have there is a wealth of visual knowledge that you're entirely that you know for a fact is accurate, right? You know, there was this thing on the windowsill when I spoke to this person, or, you know, the sunlight was streaming through this place, etc. You have the images of that. The other power of the photo is that it gives you the opportunity to abbreviate text or abbreviate complex ideas into a very simple visual presentation. So one example is that I was shooting a form of beekeeping in Georgia. It's called Jara beekeeping, where these beekeepers climb up cliffs to get out of the reach of bears and other scavengers, and they set up these beehives in these very hard to reach places. And during the story, I was wanting to write about how, you know, some people have these hives in the cliff. Some people have them near their house, and I had one photo of a hive near the house, and with that one picture, which was not a good photograph, it was just extremely valuable when shaping the picture because I didn't need to elaborate much. There it is. You know, you can see what it looks like. It is different to these other ones. I didn't need to explain any of that. I could just, you know, inform the reader in a very efficient way thanks to those visuals.
As I said earlier, you are working in Radio Free Europe, and I think some Czechs know it only as something we listen to in times of communism. So what is Radio Free Europe doing right now?
Right now, that's a very, very difficult question because we're going through all kinds of turmoil right now. One reason that we're not having lunch in this beautiful cafe where we met is that everyone's being extremely frugal and nervous to spend any money at all because we've had, in the past few months, we've had our funding sort of unofficially cut. We've gone, you know, survived month to month, and now the funding seems to be coming back. But in terms of its purpose, I think that after the fall of the Soviet Union, to be honest, I think that Radio Free Europe was really in the wilderness for a time. There was a very clear reason for being during the Soviet Union when you had unfree societies that didn't have access to news outside the sort of propaganda bubble of these leftist regimes in Europe. And after the fall of communism, I think Radio Free Europe has been trying to find its purpose again. But in terms of where we are going now, some, you know, slightly breaking news may be that we seem to be transitioning more towards once more focusing on, you know, the influence of unfree governments on free society. So, for example, China, I think to a lesser extent Iran, and of course Russia as well. So we're focusing on, for example, I'm working on a story right now about what seems to be a seismic shift underway in the European car industry, where you have these extremely aggressively priced Chinese cars, which are now very high quality, next to which European car giants just don't have an answer. And so they're setting up tariffs and other things. The Chinese are getting around that by setting up manufacturing plants in Hungary and the Balkans, other things. So stories like that actually have some meaning because there is a real, you know, there will always be some kind of ideological battle at play, and if you can be on the side of freedom, then you know, I'll always be happy to be working for that side.
So you believe that it still have its place in the modern world, and it's not just living off its history?
I think that it had been living off its history for a long time. I mean, the very fact that we are called Radio Free Europe is a relic of the past. I'm not even sure we have any radio stations anymore. We have a name of what? 4 words, and 2 of those words are radio. And we're not a radio station. So certainly it has struggled to find its purpose, and there has not been, I think, there has not been leadership with a strong vision of its modern role. And so in many ways we are kind of a relic, or at least our image is that of a relic. But in countries like Iran, for example, or in Russia, we are once more relevant by presenting news that is hard to source within the local media ecosystems in those countries.
And what interests you now as a journalist?
I think I think untold visual stories are just fascinating, and they're still out there. So right now we're going through this funding crisis. I have not been able to travel much and do the kind of work that I was hired to do. But even here within the Czech Republic, you find these incredible visual stories. They're still out there. There's still some mystery left. So an example is I recently went underground into abandoned uranium mines that were once used by the Soviets. Did you see this story?
Yes.
To dig out uranium that it used for its nuclear weapons program. And those mines were sealed up and then forgotten about. And there's this small band of very intrepid and frankly kind of crazy mineralogists and other people who were going into these abandoned mines. And there are Soviet relics. It's like this underground wild museum that's very scary, very dangerous, but visually it's like nothing I've ever seen before. And that's here in the Czech Republic, So you expand that kind of thing to all the regions that Radio Free Europe covers, and there are plenty of those stories out there, Especially, I love historical stories, and I love visual stories that have not been told or have not been told in a certain way that is possible with modern technology.
I read your article about the Ukrainian flag over Czech Parliament.
Yeah.
So you are interested in Czech politics?
Czech politics, I am not very involved, to be honest. To my great shame, I have not learned to speak Czech yet. I learned it to a certain amount to get permanent residency. But look, I love and admire this country, its culture, its history. I know everything about its history. I'm constantly reading about Czech and Prague history. But I've never learned the language, so I'm embarrassed by that. And so partly because of that, I'm not super aware of what's happening politically. I follow the headlines, and that's largely it. But I would say that I love the Czech Republic for its genuinely healthy democracy, in that you have, for example, you will have. I remember during the Black Lives Matter protests, when there was really like a sort of a very one-directional presentation of that whole era in the media, and then you had I guess very right-wing Czech media outlets sort of making fun of that whole movement at a time when it was extremely almost dangerous to do it. Certainly, very unusual to be doing it. And so you do have these opposing voices that are heard. You see protests on the street, you're supporting Ukraine, and then a counter protest, against giving funding to Ukraine, and all of these debates are very. You hear both sides of things, which is something that in countries like Germany you're just not seeing anymore. You have the narrative, and no one is really able to go outside that narrative. So it seems like a very healthy media landscape here, and I guess downstream from that is a healthy, or upstream from that, let's say, is a healthy political atmosphere too, it feels.
You said that you are interested, or you know all about our history. So what's your favorite part of Czech history?
That would have to be the parachutists, yeah. And funnily enough, I first learned about the parachutists of World War II, the killers of Reinhard Heydrich, when I was in New Zealand. And my dad was a books editor at one time for a national magazine, and he would bring home these boxes of books every month, I think. So I could just sort through and find these books. So when the book HHHH was first released, which is a very unusual historical book telling the story of Operation Anthropoid, I was able to read it early on, and that was really my first exposure to the Czech people and their story. And when I was first given a job by Radio Free Europe, I was given an apartment that ended up being just down the road from the Russian Orthodox Church, where the final showdown took place, and the museum to the parachutists are today. But that story, I mean, the fact it was Czech and Slovak, the final words of the parachutists saying, "We're Czechs, we never give up," all of these legendary things, where you can still see the physical remnants of the actions that took place in those days. You see the bullet holes on the side of the crypt. That's so far from my reality in New Zealand. We have a fairly peaceful history, and we don't have any relics of these great history shaping events that you have here in the Czech Republic. So that would be my favorite historical story.
Okay, and my last question is, do you miss sea?
Yeah, great questions, man. You're kind of getting to the heart of everything. Okay, as much as I love living in the Czech Republic, there are two things that I would say are downsides. One is the art. I've never gotten it. And the other thing is I've never gotten the deliberate ugliness of modern Czech art. Overt ugliness. And the other thing is being double landlocked is there's something in my soul really that still pines for that. So in New Zealand, I grew up in a place called Devonport where you would go to one of the most beautiful urban beaches on earth, and if that day there's a wind coming in from the north, then that's fine. You just walk 10 minutes in the other direction to the opposite coast that's behind a volcano that's completely sheltered and calm. And so to be that spoiled in terms of exposure to the coast, that enters you early on. And I've been through some very, very stressful things in the past year especially. And one of my sort of coping mechanisms is just to sit and imagine myself catching a wave on a boogie board. I like to lying down because you get in the barrel more easily. And just curling into a nice, clean East Coast barrel with clear water and maybe a stingray swimming past underneath you. That is like my happy place, and it's like a form of meditation for me to just go back to that, being in the ocean, feeling that freedom and that purity of the ocean, that even when we holiday occasionally in Bulgaria or somewhere like that, you can't replicate it. There's trash in the sea, there's cigarette butts on the beach. Croatia is too there's nothing like New Zealand in terms of the atmosphere and the beauty of the coastline, both in the water and just walking on the beach. So yeah, that's something that I will I will never quite get over, that I'll never be able to turn away from completely. I always want to be I always want to have access to that, and I'll always miss it.
Okay, that's all for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and great interview, great questions. I love it.